at Progressive Field. Mike Love throwing out the first pitch.
All right, let's see what the Beach Boy can do. Pitch out.
Well, he made it all the way, at least.
How do I do this again? Hey everyone, Emma here, also known as 8vinyllow, finally out of hibernation and bringing all of you another video. So, sorry for disappearing for about 4 months. I was not expecting to do that. I feel like I've been saying that all of the different times that I've completely disappeared and then come back and then disappear, but yeah, just super busy. It's been an unbelievably great school year so far with teaching and everything. This is my 4th year and I'm just absolutely loving it. It's been a great end to the year, so it's just been super busy. So I really haven't had time to sit down and do this, but I finally found a little bit of time to do this. I miss all of you so much. I hope that all my VC friends are doing well. I want to hear from you, so make sure to comment down below and let me know how all of you are doing. And there's so many things that I want to catch all of you up on. I've experienced so many cool shows. I've experienced so many cool music related things over the last few months. So I'm definitely planning on sharing those things with you on top of things that I have planned in the future. As I was trying to think about what's the video that I'm gonna make when I come back, what's gonna be that one video, I realized that I never made a video from July from last summer, 5 months ago, about my New Orleans, Nashville, and Chicago vinyl haul. So this is what this video is going to be. It's 5 months old. I get it. I'm really behind, but I do want to share those pickups with you, especially if you have not watched the youngest members of the VC Take NOLA documentary, which if you haven't done that, I highly recommend checking it out. The youngest members of the VC, Dylan at the Record Spinner, Marican at Marican's Music, and Jenna over at Spins and Needles. We go on a trip every single year. I talk about it a lot on this channel. So if you have not seen that documentary, I'm going to link it down below. Definitely go check it out. So over the summer, our group went to New Orleans for our yearly summer trip. We went to New Orleans. We stopped in Nashville a couple of times, and Dylan and I from the Record Spinner, we spent some time up in Chicago. We were actually scheduled to see Cheap Trick at the Metro, famous venue. They actually have a live album at the Metro, Music for Hangovers. And I'm going to talk more about that show a little bit later. I know I say later and then I'm going to come back and talk about it like a year later. But I promise I will talk about that show. I have a couple of other shows I want to talk about. But New Orleans, Nashville, Chicago, this was from July. These are the vinyl records that I picked up from that trip. Now, we went to a lot of different record stores in New Orleans while we were there. And to be honest, I really didn't pick up a lot there. I just couldn't find anything that I loved. My most favorite record store in New Orleans was Euclid Records. We also went to a handful of other ones. I'm going to probably put them somewhere so you can see where we went. Also, go watch the documentary. Our vlogs are in there. But Euclid was my most favorite store in New Orleans. So I picked up a couple of releases at Euclid. The first thing that I found while I was digging around, of course, I always have to go to the John Mayall section. I have most John Mayall albums at this point, but I always like to go there to see if I'm going to find anything that I do not have. And I came across this. John Mayall's The Turning Point. This is a live album that came out, I believe, like 1969. Yeah, 1969. This was recorded at the Fillmore East in New York City. And I already have this album, but when I saw this, I knew that I had to grab it. First off, it was $7, $6.99. And it has a little writing on here, and I own a couple of other signed John Mayall albums. I met John Mayall, got a harmonica signed and so on, and I knew right away that this was an authentic autograph. So for $7 for a signed John Mayall album, you can't go wrong. So this was definitely something that I was going to pick up. I also came across this new reissue of the Groundhog's Crosscut Saw. Now this album features a reformed Groundhogs from 1976. They actually added, so you have T.S. Tony McPhee, they actually added a second guitarist in this new reformed Groundhog. So it's not one of my favorite Groundhogs albums by any means, but it says Vintage 1976 Groundhogs featuring the mighty Tony McPhee and an expanded incarnation of the band. So this came out by Fire Records. They've been doing a lot of these Groundhogs reissues and releases, which I love. This is limited edition silver vinyl, as you can see. And again, it's not one of my favorite Groundhogs by any means, but it is still a very enjoyable album. It's very guitar heavy, and if you enjoy the heavy progressive, guitar heavy, blues rock sound of the Groundhogs, I still think that this is definitely an album worth picking up. The final record that I picked up at Euclid in New Orleans is Freak City Soundtrack reissue, Material Issue. Great power pop band coming out of the Chicago area. 1994, this is their third studio album and the final one before one of the members unfortunately took his own life. But this is a great album. It's not as great as International Pop Overthrow, but still a really, really solid power pop, Chicago power pop album. So if you really enjoy that sound, which I'm sure if you're watching this channel you probably do, I highly recommend checking out International Pop Overthrow as well as Freak City Soundtrack too. And another fun fact for my Cheap Trick fans out there, you probably know this, but Rick Nielsen does indeed make a guest appearance on this album, so another reason why I picked this up. I did grab an album from the Louisiana Music Factory. While I was in New Orleans, I was thinking of New Orleans-based bands and artists. I was looking for Dr. John. I was looking for Fats Domino, and so on. And I really wanted the studio album that Fats Domino recorded with the song Ain't That a Shame on it. Cheap Trick connection there, obviously. Cheap Trick, they re-recorded, they covered Ain't That a Shame, and it's a very famous version of that song. Probably one of the most well-known versions, so of course I wanted the Fats Domino version just to fulfill that Cheap Trick fanatic in me, but I couldn't find that one, so I did come across a compilation at that Louisiana Music Factory. This is Fats Domino all-time greatest hits, so I kind of settled here, but this compilation does indeed have Ain't That a Shame on there. It also has some other big Fats Domino's tracks like I'm Ready, All by Myself, I Want to Walk You Home, Be My Guest, and so on and so forth. So mostly wanted this for the Cheap Trick connection, mostly wanted this for Ain't That a Shame, but you can't go wrong with some classic Fats Domino's, and to buy this in New Orleans was something very special. Now, one of the highlights of the trip for me, this is the place that I was most excited to visit as a music fan in New Orleans, was Preservation Hall. We had an absolute blast. Our group called it Jazz Night. If you want to see more from that show and that experience, go check out that documentary. Again, that is linked down below. But Preservation Hall, of course, was what I was most looking forward to. It was an amazing show. They only played about 45 minutes to an hour, something like that. It's just a small little room. There's no air conditioning. We were there in July. In New Orleans, so you can imagine how hot it was in there, but it was just such a cool experience, so I highly recommend if you ever find yourself in New Orleans, you have to check out Preservation Hall. But I did end up picking up an album from there. This is a 2019 release, I believe, A Tuba to Cuba, the Preservation Hall Jazz Band. So of course I had to walk away with vinyl from that show. All right, now we are going to move on to the Nashville part of this haul and of the trip. So we stayed around Nashville on the drive down to New Orleans, and then of course on the drive back up, go watch a documentary. On the drive back up, we stopped in Nashville and actually took some time to do some record shopping and so on. Of course, being with Dylan, we had to stop at Third Man Records, and everybody ended up picking up an album that Dylan was recommending the entire trip. Actually, a band from New Orleans that was put out, their debut album. So we grabbed this. I grabbed Silver Synthetic. This is their debut album from, I believe, 2021, so it's fairly recent. I'll read kind of the hype sticker here. It says, for fans of Television, T-Rex, The Velvet Underground, and so on. So this is a fantastic retro garage psych band. So I highly recommend this album to anyone if that sounds interesting to you. I think that you will really enjoy this. I enjoyed this way more than I thought I would. I'm a fan of all of these things, but you never know. You never know what you're getting into. So Dylan was hyping this album up, and of course I trust his music taste. We all picked this up, and I have to say, after listening to this, It's an awesome debut album. Definitely recommend checking this band out. Silver Synthetic. We also stopped at Grimey's when we were in Nashville, and I did pick up a couple of records there. The first record that I picked up, and I've definitely seen this in the VC a lot recently, is the newer Simandi reissue. Great Afro, funk, soul debut album, 1972. Awesome album. So this is a recent reissue. Again, a lot of people have picked this up on this kind of like orange crush vinyl. I know that Tim over at High Noon's Vinyl, he was talking about that he was having a lot of issues with ordering this album. Every time they came in, it was coming in warped or just damaged and things like that. So I was really nervous when I finally cracked this open to go listen to it. I was nervous that mine was going to be warped, but it was not. So if you've been hearing about that, mine was not warped, so don't let that sway you away from this copy. It actually sounds excellent. So highly recommend checking this one out as well. The last record that I picked up at Grimey's, I was looking for this record so hard every single store that we went to in New Orleans. It was my absolute goal to get this album in New Orleans from this New Orleans musician, and I could not find it, which is pretty surprising. So in Nashville, I ended up picking up Dr. John the Night Tripper, Gree, I think that's how you pronounce it. This is the debut album from the king of the psychedelic bayou. This hypnotic, mystical, and powerful sound of the swamp coming to life. And you can see this kind of green swampy color here, which I absolutely love. It's this limited edition colored vinyl. This is the original 1968 mono mix on this reissue, so you know it's going to be awesome. Sourced from the original master tapes, mastered by the great Kevin Gray. So this sounds fantastic. If you are in the market for a new copy of this album, highly recommend grabbing this. Last part of this trip was Chicago. This was just me and Dylan. Again, we ended up going there right after our youngest members of the VC trip. We went to Chicago, mostly to see Cheap Trick play a sold-out Metro. And again, I will have more about that show a little bit later. If you were at that show, let me know down below. I know we ran into Vance there and so on, so it was a crazy good time. But we stopped at, I took him to a couple of stores around Chicago. Of course, I took him to Reckless and so on. We didn't have a lot of time. And then we also went to Dusty Groove and a couple of others that I don't know off the top of my head. But I did pick up some albums in Chicago with Dylan. The first album that I grabbed, I have been meaning to pick up for a while, and that is Stephen Still's debut solo album. This is the one that has Love the One You With. I think that's called, right? Yeah, Love the One You're With. I've just been eyeing this album for so long. It's just a classic debut album from Stephen Still. So I got a really good price on this, so I ended up grabbing that. I also came across, and when in Rome, right, when in Chicago, you got to do a little Jim Peterick. Of course, Jim Peterick from the great Ides of March and Survivor and 38 Special fame. But he came out with a solo album in 1976, okay? So this was post Ides of March. And this is called Don't Fight the Feeling. Now, I already knew that this existed. I just did not have this in my collection. This is something, especially around the Chicagoland area, you can find for like $1 or $2. So this was $1, or it might have been $2, so like $1.99. But it is a promo. You can see the timing demo, not for sale, down at the bottom, and then that white label promo on the back. So I'm kind of happy that I didn't already own this. Again, for a couple bucks, it didn't really matter, but it's cool to have a promo version of this album. I'm a huge fan. If you've been watching me, you know I am a huge fan of Jim Peterick, and so it's very nice to have his solo album in here. It's not a great album by any means. I don't really love it, but the completist in me needed this. At Dusty Groove, I picked up another Groundhogs release. This is a live album from the 80s, from a live show that was recorded in the early 70s, I believe. This is called Hoggin' the Stage. And I knew about this. I didn't know a lot about this album, but I knew it existed. And when I saw this at Dusty Groove, it was a no-brainer for me. I was also smart enough to look inside because I knew that this release came with a 7-inch inside, and the version at Dusty Groove did indeed. So this was One of my favorite finds of the entire trip. I'd never seen this out in the wild before, and it's in such great condition. It's gotta be, I mean, the vinyl itself is like near mint, and then you can see kind of where a hype sticker would have been and so on, but outside of that, just a really beautiful copy of this live album. So definitely a highlight of the trip for me, so thank you, Dusty Groove, for having this when we went. The last and final album that I picked up on this trip was the Grateful Dead, Europe 72. So quick little backstory about this album. By the way, I just remember not only in the NOLA documentary, that was NOLA in Nashville, but if you want to see some of these adventures in Chicago, I'm also going to link a vlog that Dylan over at the Record Spinner recorded for that as well. But moving back to Europe 72, as we were driving to New Orleans, everybody picked an album just to straight through because it was an 8-hour drive from Nashville. We all met up in Nashville. Everybody picked an album to listen to. So, of course, there was your mix of Queen and Cheap Trick and Kiss and so on. And Jenna, of course, being the huge Deadhead that she is, chose this live album, Europe 72. So the rest of us, I would say, aren't really necessarily huge Deadheads. We enjoy the Grateful Dead. I mean, I can speak for myself. I really enjoy the Grateful Dead. I don't have a lot of their albums in my collection, but every time I listen to them, I really, really like them. So everybody picked an album. Jenna picked this one, and everybody was just vibing with this. It's so good. So we kind of made a pact. If we came across this album, we would buy it. And when Dylan and I were in Chicago at one of the Reckless locations, we came across this album, so we both picked it up. So very cool to have this in the collection as well. And that is it. This is going to wrap up the New Orleans, Nashville, and Chicago vinyl finds vlog. Again, I am sorry that it is 5 months late. Better late than never, right? I did just really want to share those finds with you. Again, stay tuned on this channel. I really am planning on getting more content out. I have a lot of records that I picked up through the fall season. I also have a lot of really cool concert and stories to talk about, so definitely stay tuned with that. But with that, everybody, that's all I have for this video. I hope that all of you are having a great day, night, wherever you are, however you're watching, whenever you're watching, and I will see you all for my next video. Bye, guys.